Hello everyone, my name is Nicole Fegan, and I'm feeling fancy today. My hair is curled because I filmed my audition tape for CBS's hit reality television program Survivor today. And then, I don't know, this shirt is like a cheap material, but for some reason I feel like we're ready to go to a dinner party. But all we're actually going to be doing is talking about music. So a few weeks ago I filmed a video about the best films you probably haven't heard of. I did that based on things that I have watched and enjoyed and looked at like letterboxd views, and today we're doing the same thing but with music. I'm significantly more knowledgeable about music than I am about films. I feel like a lot of people think of me as a film person, but like music is probably the biggest thing of my life. Of the three things I talk about, I have definitely heard the most music. So today I want to talk about 10 of my favorite albums that you maybe haven't heard of. Like I said in my last video, there is no guarantee that you haven't heard of these things, especially if you're really into music. You may have heard of these things, if not actually heard of them. I just looked at the number of ratings these albums had on a music rating site, as basically like anything less than 1,000 ratings is what I'm considering as like underrated or not as known. These albums are in a random order, but we are starting with my favorite of the bunch, and that is Faces in the Rocks by Mariee Sioux. This is a contemporary folk singer-songwriter album that was released in 2007, and it is heavily inspired by Indigenous American music. Her voice is so lovely. It is just like ethereal and gorgeous, and the lyrics are full of all this storytelling and these themes of ancestry and land and life and love. Mariee Sioux herself is of Paiute descent, and this album is so rich with a lot of like indigenous instruments. You have like the Native American flute, and I think maybe a harp, and definitely accordion, and those added instruments create just like such this lush and complex atmosphere. This album makes me feel very connected to the earth, but not in a way that I feel like a lot of nature music sounds like, with like bird sounds or feeling like you're, you know, like in lush greens. It feels very earthy. It's just like so stunning. The first time I heard it, it completely blew me away, and I find myself continually going back to it. I really recommend this for fans of like Joni Mitchell, and I wrote down someone else, Joni Mitchell and Ichigo Aoba. I think if you like those artists, you would be really fond of this album, and I recommend it to anyone who likes really any kind of folk music. Up next, we have All About Satellites and Spaceships by 7% Solution. This is a space rock shoegaze album that, as far as I know, is like nowhere on streaming. You can only catch it on YouTube. Space rock is one of those genres that I feel like is either like dense and heavy or incredibly dreamy, and this is like so on the dreamy side. It seriously feels like you are floating in space. If you could do that with like and breathe easily, just feels like you are completely up there with the stars and having a great time. The album's length I think also helps with this. It's a quite long album if I recall, and yeah, it just like completely captures you in this like, it's not even hazy, it's just like this like open field of space that like sucks you in and keeps you there for an hour. I really recommend this for fans of Spiritualized. Spiritualized gets like a little more heavier with some of these songs, while like really this is just like a dreamy space album, but it is really amazing. The next album is Lavender Country by Lavender Country. This is an album that like some people know about, but I really know because my boyfriend listened to it I think about a year ago, and like it blew his mind, and then I listened to it and it blew my mind. This is a progressive country album from 1973 that is often heralded as the first gay country album. I believe the lead singer was like kicked out of the military when they found out that he liked to kiss boys. The exact quote is like somewhere on Genius, and then he started making music, and this album came out of that. There are song titles like Crying These Cocksucking Tears and Straight White Patterns, and it is just like country music that is so happy to be here. I've seen this album touted as just like a novelty album for Pride Month, but it is so much more than that, because it kind of presents like this queer utopia while also like commenting on these like the issues of heteronormativity and like gender roles. This album is a lot of fun, I'll give it that. Like it is really fun country music, but it is also like important and doing a whole lot. It's making fun of straight white patterns while also being so glad to be gay, and also just being really good music on top of that. I really recommend this for fans of John Prine. I think there are similar musical styles going on there, and John Prine is also like just my personal favorite traditional country artist. So yeah, amazing album. Next we have Within the Depths of a Darkened Forest by Autumn's Grey Solace, and when I mentioned earlier like nature albums that feel like you're in the forest, this is what I was thinking of. This is an ethereal wave dream pop album that feels like you are a dark fairy in the forest. It is so dreamy and lovely. Like, I want to show all the people who are like into like that like hunter green fairy core on TikTok this album, because I feel like they'd all love it. It's just like some of the softest, naturiest music of all time, but it's also very nocturnal. It's like you're in the forest at night and you're not scared, you're having a dreamy, wonderful time. The album is very samey because it kind of stays in that like particular soundscape for the whole thing, but I just happen to really like that soundscape. Lost off this album is one of like my favorite songs of all time. It's one of my favorite like chill, calm down songs. So if you only check out like one thing from this album, it would be that is what I would recommend. But in terms of recommending this, I recommend this for fans of like the softer side of both Cocktail Twins and Beach House, who I know both have like really complex music but also have a lot of just like dreamy stuff. And so for fans of that side of those artists, I cannot recommend this enough. Next we have Fine But Dying by Liza, and this is an indie rock album from 2018. There's a lot of like women-fronted singer-songwriter, indie rock, indie pop that I feel like a lot of people lump together. And I understand, because I also hear some of those albums and I'm just like, this is just another one. But I think this does a lot of really awesome stuff. It's simultaneously very crisp and well-produced and catchy, but I feel like it has a certain bite to it that really gives it its individuality, like amongst a sprawling genre. There's this one song, I Love You But I Need Another Year, that kind of explodes in like really effective ways. And like this album isn't quite noisy in the fact that it's like dense and hazy, but I do feel like it's just got a punch to it that I really appreciate. I really recommend this for fans of Mitski. I think Mitski is a little noisier than Liza Ann, but I think they both evoke this kind of, I don't know, they both have this kind of punch going on that I think fans of one will like the other. Up next we have By the Sea and Other Solitary Places by Annabel Lee. And this is a dark jazz, vocal jazz album that is like 100% absolutely haunted. I'm probably gonna make a video soon about music like this, but I love music that sounds like it's haunted, but isn't like explicitly like scary, spooky music, like stuff like The Caretaker. It is other music, but kind of modified to sound horrifying. And I saw someone once describe this album as like Billie Holiday at the Overlook Hotel. Because the vocal performance itself is astounding. It is this like beautiful vocal jazz that evokes like a 1930s, 1950s nightclub, but the production over it is what gives it like this very spooky, haunting vibe. It's both lush and grand because of the vocal performance, but also very fuzzy and very scary because of what is done to it. I mentioned The Caretaker, and I think if you're a fan of The Caretaker, you would be very, very into this album, but I also think fans of Portishead could be into this, because while it doesn't have like those city vibes, like that trip-hop element, I do think that there is something to be said in the similarity of the vocal performances. Next we have Torch Song by Radiator Hospital, and this is an indie rock, indie pop, twee pop album. The vocal performance itself and like the guy's voice screams twee, but the overall production I feel like is a lot noisier and rockier than what you would like usually expect from a twee pop album. This feels like little punches of life. The songs are so short and the lyrics are so heartfelt and full of love and heartbreak, and like it seriously feels like it's like these bursts of emotion just popping out at you like one after another after another. Twee is a genre that I also feel like is very, very just glad to be here, and you get that energy coming through on this album. It just like completely comes at you all at once. There are some of the most like devastating lyrics of all time in this album too. Like if you just listen to the music, you're having a great time, and then if you go look at the lyrics, you're like ready to end it all. But I really recommend this for fans of like Nana Grizzle or The Pains of Being Pure at Heart, people who like their twee but a little bit more on the rock side. Next we have Shallow by Oleena, and this, I thought that the Autumn's Grey Solace album was the softest album I was going to talk about, but this one actually takes a cake for being like seriously the softest music of all time. This is a dream pop, ambient pop album, and along with being soft, like I think the word I would seriously use for this album is healing. It is so, so gentle, and it feels like you've just been put into a very happy cloud. Happy is definitely the wrong word. Like, you know how you always imagined being in a cloud would feel like you're just floating up there and like you're surrounded by this like ethereal whiteness? Like that is just what this album feels like. It feels like you have no worries and you're being healed by the cloud of the music. I think what I'm trying to express is that it feels very open. Like, you have, like, the music is happening, but then outside there is no denseness. It is just openness, and it allows you to be very, very calm. It reminds me most of a lot of the more sparse grouper tracks. I really, really recommend this album for fans of grouper, but I also think fans of like Julia Holter can find things to love about this, because I think her vocal performance and some of her melodies feel to me like some of the softer Julia Holter work. Next we have Mr. Twin Sister by Mr. Twin Sister, which is an album I listened to very recently, and this might be one of like the single most unique albums I have ever listened to. The genres ascribed to this are dream pop, down-tempo, and alternative dance, and the way I described this like when I first listened to this album is that it was equal parts Bjork, Portishead, and Sade with some dashes of grouper and beach house, which are I think almost all artists I've mentioned. It's very lush and at times very sensual. I feel like the vocal performance really reminds me of Sade, which is why she's in there, but it also has kind of like this trip-hop down-tempo element, which is what the Portishead is, but it also is very dreamy, like a group house or, nope, a grouper or a beach house, not a group house. It's kind of doing a slightly different thing in every single track, and yet it all comes together in this very cohesive little album. It's kind of the kind of danceable that makes you want to sway. Like, it is very, sexy is the wrong word, it's not sexy music, but it is very sensual music, I find. Talking about this has made me want to like go re-listen to that, so maybe I'm gonna spin that later, but yeah, it's just one of the most unique albums ever, and I think it does all the things it's trying to do incredibly well. And finally, we have Loops of Infinity, a Rave Love Letter by DJ Metatron. This is another album that, in the time I'm filming this, is not available on streaming. I also listened to it on YouTube, and this is a ambient trance album that is a love letter to raves. It is a very hypnotic album that feels like you're at a rave, but isn't quite rave music. It's like rave music put into like this ambient album. It gives me nostalgia for crowded spaces and for like the anonymity of being in those crowded spaces, and you know, like, think of being like at a very big party and it's neon and you're dancing and you feel nothing but like euphoria. The music is very repetitive and beat oriented, but the repetition is obviously very intentional because it's creating this trance and this hypnosis. I just think it does a very, very good job at evoking the very specific feeling it is trying to evoke. I really haven't heard a lot of trance music or ambient trance music. I think the only other even vaguely ambient trance thing I've heard is a James Ferraro album, so I don't really know who to recommend this to, but I think if those themes of nostalgia and like party music from times long gone are things that are interesting to you, I think you would be really into this album. So those are 10 of my favorite albums that you maybe haven't heard of. I really love all those albums. I have like 20 more to go, so if this is a kind of video that you're interested in, please let me know. I love talking about music. I mean, I love talking about anything, but like, again, music I feel like is my thing. Like, it's more than any of the things, I feel like that might be what I feel like is my thing. So that all said, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you end up listening to any of these albums, and hopefully I will do another one of these sometime soon. But that is all I have for you today, and you guys will see me in the next one. There's no way you can hear that, but my can of grapefruit citrus Zevia is like making so many bubbles. I wonder if you can hear it.